Hey everybody, it's Ron from Pick Dawgz, and this is Ron's Rundown. We're going to go over 10 college football games for Week 9, Saturday, October 28th, 2023. Now, if you like what you see, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to put your college football picks in the comments section below. And if you're looking for my best bets, you can find those at the Premium Picks tab at pickdawgz.com. Alrighty, let's get into it. Here are the games for Week 9 in college football. First up, we go to the Big Ten as Indiana takes on Penn State. This one, 12 o'clock Eastern on CBS. Penn State is a huge favorite in this game, coming off the loss to Ohio State, 20-12 in that one. Low-scoring game, defensive battle. Penn State's defense, we know about it. It's been one of the best defenses in the country, but the offense, when it needed it most, only 1.9 yards per carry on the ground, 18 of 42 passing. It just wasn't there for the Nittany Lions, but I do expect a bounce-back performance here and, a feel-good blowout win at home. Penn State still has a chance to make it to the Big Ten title game. They play Michigan in a few weeks at home. It's a winnable game there, and then Michigan gets to host Ohio State later this season as well. Michigan, it's not easy beating any team on their home field in the Big Ten. So if Penn State beats Michigan and then Michigan beats Ohio State, the three top teams in the Big Ten East are now 1-1 and all have one loss and are 1-1 against each other. So the tiebreaker would be interesting there. But I think Penn State, a big coaching mismatch in this one with Allen on the other side for Indiana. This team is just not playing well this season on either side of the ball. We've seen their last two road games against Michigan and Maryland, 44-17 and 52-7. I think Penn State just scores at will. The defense doesn't give up much of anything at all. And I think Penn State wins this game and covers the numbers. So I'm going to take the Nittany Lions and lay the points. Next up, we see South Carolina taking on Texas A&M. This one, 12 o'clock Eastern. It's going to be on ESPN. Both of these teams not in the best of form recently. We saw South Carolina lose its third straight game, and 4 of its last 5 games have been losses now for the Gamecocks, while the Aggies, they lost 2 straight against Alabama and then at Tennessee. But A&M's now off a bye week, and those 2 losses to Bama and Tennessee, not really bad losses. South Carolina, though, in its last game against Missouri, lost 34-12, so a blowout loss. They only put up 286 total yards. They gave up 5.4 yards per carry on the ground. I think Texas A&M is better on both sides of the football, but especially on the defensive end. They have a huge home field advantage, the rest advantage, just playing the better football in general. I don't love Max Johnson at quarterback, but at least he has SEC experience. He's been decent in the game manager role, so far. I think he has more of a breakout game here against a weak South Carolina secondary. Give me the Texas A&M Aggies laying the points at home. Next up, it's a directional Michigan rivalry between Western Michigan and Eastern Michigan. This one, 1 o'clock Eastern. It's going to be on ESPN+. We've mentioned a few times on the Rundown and the College Football Live show, Eastern Michigan's been a cash cow when it comes to covering as a road underdog. Last week, again, against Northern Illinois, they were catching about double digits, and Eastern Michigan didn't win the game, but they lost 20-13. Good enough for a cover again with EMU on the road as that underdog, but not nearly as strong when they're a home underdog, especially in conference play. In fact, since 2005, Eastern Michigan's been a home underdog in MAC play a total of 49 times, and in those games, they're 18-31 against the number, hitting right around a 37% clip. Obviously, that's not going to make you much money, and it's better to fade Eastern Michigan when they're the home dog. And that's what I'm going to do here. Western Michigan has really improved as the season's gone along. They played a really tough schedule in non-conference play at Syracuse, at Iowa. Then they opened the conference schedule at Toledo, the toughest team in the conference, a road game. They put up 31 points in that ballgame against one of the best defenses in mid-major college football. So I've been impressed with Western Michigan, even though the win-loss record doesn't look great. They've been competitive. Their run game's getting there. The passing game is not my favorite. The quarterback play has not really been there for Western Michigan, but I think it's good enough against a really weak Eastern Michigan secondary. Eastern Michigan offensively only averaging 3.4 yards per carry on the ground. They're giving up a sack on 11.1% of passing plays. The defense is giving up 5 yards per carry to the opposing run games. I don't think Eastern Michigan has a chance in this one. Give me Western Michigan laying the points. Next up, we see BYU taking on Texas. This one, 3:30 Eastern. It's going to be on ABC. Now, I know a lot of people are thinking this could be a potential upset spot for BYU because Quinn Ewers is out for Texas. He suffered an injury in the win against Houston last week, so the Longhorns are going to have to go with either, Malik Murphy is likely to be the starting quarterback, but Arch Manning also took some snaps this week in practice. I'm not really worried about Texas offensively. This is one of the deepest quarterback groups in college football, program-wise, year after year. And it's also a team that had to deal with quarterback injuries last year. So I'm really not worried about the Longhorns. They should be able to move the ball fine against a BYU defense that's giving up almost 400 yards per game this season, more so on the road, especially 457 yards per game away from home. We saw them give up just under 600 yards to TCU in a 44-11 blowout loss. BYU has been a bend but don't break defense. They force a lot of turnovers. We saw last week against Texas Tech. They were +5 in the turnover differential in that win. But I just think it's unsustainable going forward. They're a very volatile team on both sides of the ball, BYU is, and they have a winning record. But when you look at offensively, this team's been so one-dimensional. They cannot run the football. Last week, they got going a bit on the ground, but they're still only averaging 2.8 yards per carry this season. The offensive line play's not been good, and they've only earned more than 300 yards 2 times this season, one against Kansas, a decent team, but the other one against Southern Utah. So this team has not been great offensively. Slovis has not been what BYU fans expected he would be. And while it's been okay for the win-loss record right now, I think going forward, BYU going to suffer some bad losses. I think this is one of them. I think Texas is far better on both sides of the ball. Even without Ewers, I think the Longhorns win this game in blowout fashion. So give me Texas laying the points. Next up, we see Virginia and Miami. This one, 3:30 Eastern on the ACC network. Virginia, of course, coming off that big-time upset against North Carolina on the road, 31-27. UVA started 0-5 to start the year. They beat they won their first game against an FCS opponent, so still looking for their first FBS win of the year, and that's at North Carolina, one of the better teams in the ACC. Really impressive stuff, but I do worry about a letdown spot here. And, one could argue maybe this is a letdown spot for Miami. I don't personally think so, because while they did upset Clemson at home in an emotional overtime game, I think Miami as a program, especially going into the season and after the first few weeks of the season, had a lot bigger goals than just barely beating a down year Clemson team at home. I think Miami still has a lot to play for the rest of the year, potentially making a New Year's Six bowl if they can, win, really pretty much win out in the rest of the regular season. But I think Miami wins this game comfortably. Tyler Van Dyke is expected to be back in, the starting quarterback role for Miami. It was honestly a surprise that he was out for last week's game against Clemson. I think the Canes pretty much expected that he was going to be the option, but he wasn't able to go. Miami still found the win. The defense was really strong against Clemson. I think the defense strong in this game as well. Miami should be able to move the ball at will against a Virginia defense that's giving up 31 points per game this season and 36 points per game on the road. Give me Miami in a blowout. I think it's a letdown spot for the Cavs. Next up, we see Wyoming and Boise State. This one, 5:30 Eastern. It's going to be on Fox Sports 2. Now, both of these teams coming off a bye week, so no rest advantage for either team, and both of these teams coming off losses, but one of those losses for Boise State was extremely disappointing. I think disappointing is, putting it lightly, pretty much a disaster for Boise State, who was up 30-10 with 6:12 to go in the fourth quarter against Colorado State in its last game. They gave up 3 touchdowns, including one on the final play of the game, 33 yards, and they lose that one 31-30. Not only was it a bad beat for anybody that had Boise State money line or just a fan of Boise State in general, but also it pushed the game over the total. So to make matters worse, the total was 60 points. That last touchdown made it 31-30, and in a game that looked like it was going well under the number, it found its way over. But in this matchup, I don't love backing Wyoming on the road. I do think Boise State bounces back. They were dominating that game. I mean, they were up 21 or 17-0 at halftime against Colorado State. They had a 252-71 yard advantage at halftime of that game, and it just kind of slipped away from them. But this is still the better team on both sides of the ball, in my opinion. Wyoming on the road this season, only 2 true road games, but they're only scoring 19 points per game on the road compared to 29 at home. They're giving up 33 points per game on the road compared to 23 at home. So much better numbers at home, where they have a huge home field advantage in Laramie. But now on the road here, Boise State, a fired up frustrated Boise State team. I don't think Wyoming stands a chance, and we're getting a pretty good price with Boise State because of their season struggles, because of that losing record. Give me the Broncos here, laying the points at home. Next up, we see Ohio State and Wisconsin. This one's 7:30 Eastern. It's going to be on NBC. Now, Ohio State's coming off that big win against Penn State, 20-12 the final score. This could be considered a bit of a letdown spot for the Buckeyes, who go on the road against Wisconsin, a team that had high expectations going into this season, but already have 2 losses on the schedule, and they're without their quarterback in Tanner Mordecai, who's going to be out indefinitely with a broken hand. The Buckeyes, I still think, win this game, but when there's been a home team in this series, there's been a few neutral site games along the way the last 15 years, but the home team in this series, the last 8 meetings, is 7-1 against the spread. Wisconsin's defense has been solid allowed at home this season, giving up only 15 points per game at home, only 3.6 yards per carry on the ground. They're a pretty solid offensive line. They've only given up 1 sack or fewer in 4 of the last 5 games. A good ground game, earning about 4.8 yards per carry. I think the quarterback play is still questionable for Wisconsin. I don't think they do a ton offensively, but I think they're good enough defensively to keep this game within those 2 touchdowns. Give me Wisconsin plus the points at home. Next up, we see Southern Miss and Appalachian State. This one's going to be 3:30 Eastern. It's going to be on ESPN+. I think it's fair to say that this is a rebuilding year for Appalachian State, a very proud program in the Sun Belt, one of the better programs in the Sun Belt, and a team that hasn't been in FBS football for that long, but already has big achievements in the conference. But they're 3-4 this season. Their defense has struggled mightily, and they've lost their last 2 games to Old Dominion and Coastal Carolina. App State's run defense has given up 5 or more yards per carry in 3 of the last 4 games. And the secondary hasn't been much better when you look at pass efficiency defense, one of the worst teams in college football and in FBS football. So I do think Southern Miss, the offense could get going in a game like this. And it's not like we haven't seen Southern Miss compete offensively in games prior in Sun Belt play. I know the last week game against South Alabama, it was an ugly loss, 55-3. But they lost a 1-score game against Arkansas State, a 1-score game against Old Dominion. It should have been a 1-score game against Texas State as they put up 510 yards against the Bobcats in that one, almost at a big comeback victory. But, Southern Miss has been able to put up some solid performances this year. I think we see one of those here. It's just a spot where I wouldn't want to lay this many points with a defense I don't trust at all. So give me Southern Miss plus the points. Probably lean towards the over as well. Next up, we see Cincinnati taking on Oklahoma State. This one's going to be 8 o'clock Eastern. It's on ESPN2. I think Cincinnati's extremely undervalued in a spot like this, and I think the same thing can be said in the other direction for Oklahoma State. I think they're overvalued in this game. Cincinnati, the mistakes have killed this team this season. They're moving the ball well. Their defense has put up solid numbers, but the turnovers, the turnover on downs, the special teams mistakes, they have killed Cincinnati, but it's not like they don't have a good special teams unit. They have one of the better punters in college football. But we saw last game against Cincinnati or against Baylor. The first drive they go all the way down the field. They get a turnover on downs. We've seen fumbles from Emory Jones. We saw a fumble on the kickoff return for Cincinnati that was recovered by Baylor and returned for a touchdown. Those mistakes have just hurt Cincinnati all season. And while you could say maybe that's just the way this team is built, I just don't think it's sustainable for an entire season. I think Cincinnati still has a lot of talent on this roster. The offensive line's been there. They run the ball 5 yards per carry. Emory Jones is facing one of the weakest secondaries he's faced all season now against Oklahoma State. And Cincinnati's defense, great against the run, solid secondary. They get good pressure on the opposing quarterbacks. I think Cincinnati has a chance to win this game outright. When you look on the other side for Oklahoma State, you look at the record for this team, 5-2, 3-1 in conference play. They're being priced as if they're one of the better teams in the Big 12, but I just don't think so. I mean, Oklahoma State, we saw going into the season on paper, this looked like it was going to be a rebuilding year for the Cowboys, and I still think it's not going to be the greatest end of the season for this team, as yes, they pulled together some nice wins against Kansas State and Kansas, last week at West Virginia, but at the beginning of the season, they beat Central Arkansas and Arizona State. They lose to South Alabama 33-7, lose at Iowa State 34-27, giving up 34 points to that offense. And is this still a team in the last 2 weeks has given up 975 total yards combined? The secondary, like I mentioned, one of the weaker ones in the Big 12. The run defense has been solid overall this year, but it hasn't been great as of late. And I still don't trust the quarterback play for Oklahoma State. They use a plethora of quarterbacks at the beginning of the season trying to find that answer. They may have that answer now, but I still don't think against the solid Cincinnati secondary it's going to be good enough to win and cover this big number. Give me Cincinnati plus the points with a sprinkle on the money line. Next up, we see Oregon State and Arizona. This one's going to be 10:30 Eastern. It's on ESPN. And I think Arizona smells blood in the water in this matchup. Both teams coming off a bye week, but Arizona has played really competitively in conference play despite some injuries and playing one of the tougher schedules in the conference thus far. Their last game was on the road at Washington State. They won 44-6 in that ball game. Before that, on the road at USC, only a 2-point loss, 43-41 the final. They put up 500 yards in that game. Then before that, only losing by 1 score to Washington, who's you could argue the best team in the conference right now. And then before that, a win at Stanford. So Arizona's played well in Pac-12 play. Despite those injuries, like I mentioned, the defense has been there, only giving up 3 yards per carry. And Oregon State's only played a couple of true road games this year. One against Washington State, that was an outright loss. The other one at Cal. The defense did not hold up in either of those games. They gave up 38 points at Washington State, 528 total yards, over 400 yards passing against a Washington State offense that is not playing very well right now. And then Cal, they gave up 448 yards and 40 points to the Bears in that ball game, despite the win. And, DJU, I don't know if we can trust them in another true road game here. Like I said, the defense already struggling. I just think that Arizona, I think it's a potential upset win outright, but I'll take the points just in case as we're getting more than a field goal. Give me the points with the Wildcats at home. And that's it. Those are the games for Week 9 in college football. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. And don't forget to put your college football picks in the comments section below. Again, if you're looking for my best bets, you can find those at the Premium Picks tab at pickdawgz.com. As always, this is Ron Romanelli. Good luck.